Now that we know about Darwin and his 4 premises, let's focus on natural selection. And remember that natural selection is what's happening over time that leads a population to look more like that adaptive phenotype. So natural selection is governed by the principles of genetics that we studied in the last unit, that probability of offspring having a particular trait, the genes that are available to be passed on, as well as the inheritance pattern that those genes followed. So all that stuff that we learned in the last unit. Now, natural selection can lead to changes in the population over many generations, and can even lead to new species. The creation of a new species is known as speciation. And over a really long time, it can even lead to evolution. Evolution is due to random effects. So random mutation plays a role, changes in the organism's surroundings or the environment, natural selection, and extinction is important too. Remember that extinction means no longer in existence. So we can have the extinction of a species. Please remember that individuals die, species become extinct. So you can't say my grandma went extinct last year. No, grandmas die, but if every single human on the planet died, then humans would be extinct. Such as dinosaurs are now extinct because all the dinosaurs no longer exist. So is the dodo bird, which is sad. So there are 3 major types of natural selection known as disruptive, stabilizing, and directional. You'll need to be able to tell from a graph and from an example which type of natural selection is happening. Okay? Now, natural selection is based on how the phenotype interacts with the environment. What is fit for that environment? What is beneficial for that environment? So it is how the environment interacts with the phenotype. The environment is the deciding factor. Okay, notice I just said that like 4 or 5 times. That probably means it's important. All right, please note that there's not a lot on this slide, so you need to take notes on what I'm saying. It's time for you guys to learn how to take real notes, okay? So directional selection is our first one. In this graph, the dotted line represents the original population's variation. The solid line represents the population after selection. Notice that it has shifted from one side to the other. That is directional because it has shifted in one direction, okay? So what could have caused this? Let's think of an example. So on the side here, if there were a label, it would be, let's say, beak size, okay? So in the original population of birds, we had some with small, thin beaks, an average medium-sized beak, lots of individuals there, and then a few had large, robust beaks. Now let's say there was a 100-year drought. Well, in a drought, all of the soft, easy to crack open seeds are going to die off. They're not going to be in existence anymore. The only seeds that are going to be available are going to be hard, robust seeds that can survive the drought. That means that birds with these soft, weak, small beaks are not going to be able to eat the only food that's now available, those hard seeds. But birds that just happen to have a little bit more robust of a beak, just because of their genetic variation, are going to be able to eat those hard seeds. So they're going to have food. They're going to be able to reproduce. These guys are going to die off. So what happens in directional selection is there's selection against one extreme. One extreme is bad. In this example, small beaks is bad. Big beaks is good. So what happens is over time, the median beak size goes from down here to up here. Okay, directional selection. It moved in one direction. In this example, to a larger beak. Now, there are literally hundreds of different examples you could use. This is just one. And in just a few minutes, you're going to have a worksheet where you're going to be given some graphs, and it's going to say, you give an example of what could have happened. Okay? Be creative, but that's what I'm looking for. How did the environment change to cause this? And you need to be specific. So if you still need more help with this, please pause the video now and call me over so we can talk about directional selection one-on-one. Next up is stabilizing selection. Okay, again, dotted line represents the original population. There's variation there from one size to median to the other side. Now, with stabilizing selection, you have selection against both extremes. So both extremes, both ends of the spectrum are bad, and medium is good. We're stabilizing around one measurement. Okay, that's why it's stabilizing selection, because we're stabilizing in the middle. Okay, I also like to call this the Goldilocks selection, but that's just me, that's not scientific, because too little is bad, too big is bad, but in the middle is just right, just like Goldilocks liked. Okay, so let's come up with an example. Let's say human birth size in the 1500s, back before we had all this technological advancements that we have now. Okay, so in the 1500s, if a baby was born that was too small, then it couldn't survive outside the womb. Its lungs weren't fully developed, and it would usually die very quickly. Okay, if a baby was too big at birth, then it couldn't fit through the birth canal, and both mama and baby would die. But babies who are medium-sized are just right. They are big enough to survive outside the womb, but small enough to actually fit through the birth canal. So medium-sized babies were selected for, and so now most babies are in the median. Okay. Again, this was back before all the technology that we have now. Okay. So stabilizing selection, middle is good, extremes bad. Our third type is disruptive selection, because you're disrupting the pattern. You're creating two peaks. This is where the selection is against the mean. So middle is bad, and the two extremes, the two edges, are good. Okay? Something important to note about disruptive selection is that this kind of selection is the one that is most likely to lead to speciation. Let me repeat that. Disruptive selection is the one that is most likely to lead to speciation. Okay, so disruptive selection is the one that is most likely to lead to new species developing. Okay, so again, dotted line represents the original population, a nice variation. Okay, middle is bad, extremes are good. So you start to see these two different peaks, which can lead to, what did I say it can lead to? Speciation. Okay, so an example here would be beetle color. So let's say that the original population goes from light green to medium green to dark green. Okay, so all the same species, they just have a range of variation in their color. Well, the light green beetles, they blend in really good on the bottom side of leaves, because the bottom side of a leaf is a light green. So they blend in really good. They can hide on the bottom of the leaves and not get eaten. Now, on the other extreme, the dark green beetles, they blend in really well on the top side of leaves, because the top side of leaves are darker green. So they can hang out on the top side of leaves and they blend in and they don't get eaten. But now these medium green beetles, ooh, they got it rough. They're too dark to hang out in the light green underbelly of the leaves, and they're too light to hang up on the top side of the leaves, so they're easily seen in both places and they're eaten. So over time, you don't see a lot of these medium green ones because they all got eaten, and all the light green and dark green survive. Okay, so over time, as these two are hanging out in the different areas of the leaf, they might become different species if their genetics become different. Okay, so remember these three, make sure you can tell from pictures what's going on, make sure you can make up your own examples, make sure you can tell from a story. Okay, if you need help with these, please pause now and call me over. So something else that we need to know about that comes from natural selection happening on population is called adaptive radiation. This is the process of organisms changing rapidly through natural selection to create many, many new species from one original species. This is usually going to be due to a large change in the environment or from one species colonizing a new environment. So when one species is in an area and they're competing for the same resource, they're competing, it's making it hard for them to live. Well, to help reduce competition, they're going to start trying to go out for different resources. And over a very long period of time, you can have them specializing to a new resource. So now they're not competing with just one species. Now they're competing for a new resource. For a little while, that means no competition for that resource until speciation occurs, and then there's lower competition amongst themselves. This is what Darwin saw with Darwin's finches. These are his most famous observation, are the finches. On the Galapagos Islands, there were tons and tons of finches. They're all birds that were originally from the same population. But over time, their beaks adapted to different food sources. And for so long that they became separated by their behaviors and became new species. So you've got these guys that have these robust beaks that can crack open really hard seeds and nuts. You've got these guys who are really good at catching insects. These really crazy beaks that are really good at reaching into flowers and reaching nectar in flowers that have those big flower cups. Okay, so this is an example showing how natural selection acted on the canines. These are all members of the canine group, but you have jackals, African wild dogs, foxes, wolves, coyotes. They're all different species, but they all came from an ancestral canine. But as the canines spread out into new environments, as they spread, those environments had different challenges for them. And so natural selection acted on them in different ways, causing the differences in these groups. So one last thing we need to talk about today is genetic drift. This is a random change in allele frequencies. This is usually due to a small population size, and there are two kinds. Okay, so genetic drift is only going to happen when a population is significantly reduced. You have a bottleneck effect, which is when the population is reduced to low numbers, usually due to a disease, hunting by humans, or some other catastrophic event like a hurricane or a volcano. Okay? The remaining individuals that just randomly happened to survive, it's not necessarily that they were more fit for the environment, they just got lucky and weren't sitting in a place where the volcano rolled over them. Okay, so those individuals that survive randomly have a different allele frequency than the whole population originally had. And so then when that new population begins to breed, you lost some of those variations randomly due to the big kill-off of individuals. And so that means when they reproduce and create the new population, it's going to be different from the original. The second is known as a founder effect. This is where a group of individuals is relocated to a new location. Maybe a portion of a flock of birds get relocated to a new island due to a hurricane. Or maybe some just happen to randomly float over the ocean on a log. Okay? Or humans do it with the way that we divide up populations with our roads and bridges. So when this subgroup is in this new area, it is the founding group. Just randomly, the individuals who got there may have a different allele frequency than the original population, so the new population looks different. Let's look at a picture for an example. Okay, so here's the original population. Lots and lots of variation. Okay, just by chance, this little group of individuals, okay, founding population A, gets blown 50 miles away into a new patch of trees. When they reproduce, here's what the new population looks like. Okay, some of it's the same, but notice it's different. There's none of these gray guys. There's none that look like this guy. Okay, so this new population is different by random chance. Okay, let's say in that same, let's say it was a hurricane that blew them away. These guys got blown 50 miles in the other direction to a new stand of trees. So this is your new founding population. Notice by chance, it's randomly slightly